The parties are ramping up their campaigns ahead of elections in just under 3 weeks, but it often requires deep pockets to be able to reach potential voters. The Northwest University Business School's Albert van Zyl believes that party funding disclosure is critical in helping voters know the money behind the leader. Or the leaders. Van Zyl joins us now for more on that. Albert, good to have you, and thank you very much for coming on. What is that line between lobbying or political lobbying, as it were, and bribery, or what we like to call state capture here in South Africa?
Thank you very much, Tambo. It's a great honor. So, yeah, that is exactly the issue we have. On the one hand, we want to prevent that people obtain unjust position, that they only fill their own pockets or a certain segment of society. And that's exactly what happens in instances like state capture, where we had. State capture is a form of corruption where we focus on a particular side of the system. Normally in corruption, your focus is on the bureaucratic process to ensure that law is not applied. But in the case of state capture, we get people who have laws written to fit their particular needs, and that is what makes state capture so very dangerous. But now you can say, in terms of politics plays a very important role in society. Elections is very important, but there's also always a need for people to say that we want our particular interests forwarded or improved, and then the line becomes very dangerous to see when do I engage in something that is illegal, where I pay to serve my own interest, or instances where I lobby in the interest of the greater good.
But one could argue that both, in a sense, are aimed at influencing the outcomes of regulations, maybe even a political situation, because others are saying a huge chunk of the parties being funded, especially new parties, parties that are grouped under a collective opposition to unseat a particular party that is in place, i.e. the ANC. Is that not the same?
Yeah, it's difficult. So remember, what we want with an election that is free and fair, is that the voice of the people is heard, that they are not unduly influenced in their decision making, and that's specifically what happens in a time of an election. The dangers that we need to fight off is firstly undue influence. One thing we're concerned, not only South Africa but internationally, is all these deep fake videos, the use of social media, false news that is spread, that we ensure that our public are able to make a free and informed decision. And that is what the danger is when political parties are funded and enabled to exert influence that they actually don't have. And that is why we have this specific legislation put in place to ensure that there is proper rules that we abide with. Now, interesting, this legislation in South Africa came into operation in January 2019, but it actually took a lot of time for us to have it enacted. The interesting thing of it is as a signatory of the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, South Africa has, since 2004, I believe, that we entered into that convention, have an obligation to put in place legislation like that. And that is at least a good step in the right direction for us.
So does it matter that a huge chunk, millions in fact, that are currently coming through, as per the disclosures, are coming from familiar figures within the South African political funding ecosystem. So particular families, either in the mining space, in the gambling space, but these are families that generally are familiar in this particular space, and others would say are reaping the economic benefits.
Yeah. Remember, so what we know at this point in time is because the Act calls upon parties to declare donations in excess of a certain amount. We are aware through those declarations of, as you said, certain families linked to the mining. Of course, those are the guys with the most money in the country. But at least I believe the fact that it is declared makes it open and transparent. Now we know where they stand. Some of them not only declared that they paid money to a single party. I think Patrice Motsepe, for instance, through African Rainbow Minerals and so forth. He has a very interesting stance, which I think is very nice, in that he supported a number of political parties, not equally so, but he through that, he demonstrates that he believes that we need to support a democratic system. And I think that is the essence that we should focus on, to have a transparent process, that we say we do accept money, but it needs to be controlled. There are limits set to it, that we don't accept monies from outside parties, foreign companies or foreign governments, that we don't accept money from state-owned entities within the country or governmental institutions. Then I think you have a safe environment where it can operate properly.
So there are some who are, for example, doubting the credibility of the information or the data that would put the ANC, for example, or even the DA at the bottom of the donor list, looking at the type of campaign that those parties would have mounted. How possible is it that such parties would register such a significantly low degree of donations, yet are able to invest so much into their campaigns?
Yeah, and that is a concern I think we can express. The Act requires and calls upon parties to declare money they received to the IEC, and the IEC then quarterly reports on it. But the Act also calls upon donors to report to the IEC when they make such donations. If it's not done, and if they're caught out, it is indeed criminalized, or a fine can be imposed. We haven't seen any of that yet in the country. Now, that means one of two things. Either nobody has committed any such transgression, or that it hasn't been properly investigated yet, which is also a possibility. Of course, we believe that is not the case. But yes, I agree with you. These elections cost a lot of money, and there are some instances. I didn't investigate it because I don't have all the access to it. But there are some questions that we can raise and say certain parties we don't see their names figure there, and it certainly does raise some questions.
So others saying, well, some of this comes from pre-election funding allocations to political parties from Treasury. Others saying, well, parties have been receiving party donations and so on and so forth. And there are those who are saying these parties have managed to successfully find a loophole, for example, in the system in terms of the threshold of when you're supposed to declare, and are able to tell their donors, just make a contribution just below the threshold, and therefore there will be no need for me to declare it.
Yeah, of course, there will always be loopholes that can be determined or found. The one issue, for instance, is, as you know, with the whole grey listing of South Africa, a lot of attention was paid to the question of beneficial ownership of companies and trusts. And that's, for instance, something that is very applicable in terms of this party political funding, because it simply says the current act that you have to declare that you made a contribution to a political party, but it doesn't require any entity, either the ISC or the political party, to tell us who are indeed the people behind such entities. And that is one particular loophole that may exist, and that because if you look at for example at one of the funders of the DA, for instance, Fynbos Beleggings. So that's a close corporation. Now, of course, you can go to records of the CIPC and determine who the owner of that is. That is not too impossible. But there are instances, specifically with trusts, that it is not that easy to determine who actually sat behind that.
Albert, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on. Albert van Zyl, Northwest University Business School, the academic.